Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So, do you like my trim? See, that's the thing, that if you come regularly, you'll notice that Rabbi Neely's beard waxes and wanes depending upon the different seasons. For the last 33 days, give or take a little bit right before Pesach, this has gone untrimmed. You don't notice it quite so much with the hair, but the beard still grows faster. And it's gone untrimmed because we are in the period known as the counting of the Omer, which I tried to remind you about, and hopefully you're still participating in. But today is Lag BaOmer. That is to say, it is Lamed, the 30th, Gimel, 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, and, well, things change. Gotta get a little bit of context here. You see, there's nothing in the Torah about Lag BaOmer. The Torah tells us to count the days between Pesach and Shavuot, coming up very soon. You can do the math since it's day number 50, and we're going to have our dessert competition, our study and services. It'll be a lot of fun. But it doesn't tell us that we need to be not cutting our hair or not trimming our beards. That is something that came, well, only about 2,000 years ago, and around the middle of the 2nd century of the Common Era. You see, during this time of year, there was a catastrophe unfolding among our people. The disciples, the students of Rabbi Akiva, were dying in droves during this period of the counting of the Omer. And that mass die-off from a plague, which we'll come back to in a second, finished on the 33rd day of the Omer. This was the end of that intense, catastrophic period. And so, during the first 33 days, we observed a commemorative pseudo-mourning of type position. Not shaving, not trimming, other spurious activities are curtailed. And then on the 33rd day, well, we can get trimmed and we can clean ourselves up again because the catastrophe had passed. Everybody following the logic there? Right, so 2,000-year-old mourning practice. But if you're paying careful attention, you'll notice that I said we can conclude the mourning practice. We can begin to get haircuts and trim our beards and do other such activities. But I always make it a point to do that on Lag BaOmer, to make sure that I don't wait another day. Now, it's not just that I don't want to have a bushy beard. I'm quite indifferent. My beard gets many different lengths and I'm okay. But it's significant to me that I make sure to take that earliest opportunity to give myself, even if it's just a small trim. And that's because we have to understand the underlying issues that were going on in antiquity and how that can influence us still almost 2,000 years later. You see, the great catastrophe that was befalling Rabbi Akiva's students was called a plague. Now, plague can mean many different things. After all of us have celebrated Pesach. We know about the 10 plagues. And there is very little of what we would call a viral plague. There's very little of what we would call a disease. Plagues in the biblical nomenclature tends to mean catastrophes, disasters. Now, there are some who have argued that this was indeed a more virusy type plague and that it was wreaking havoc and then only came to a conclusion at Lag BaOmer. But that leaves us with a question of, well, why would Rabbi Akiva's students have been especially vulnerable to such a virus? Were they just not good at social distancing? Did they not wash their hands properly? I don't think we would believe that. We know that washing hands is very important in Jewish practice. And so instead we have a tradition of reading that term plague a little bit more politically. You see, Rabbi Akiva was famous not just for being a genius and an amazing leader of our people, but he led our people, well, into a war. Rabbi Akiva was famous for supporting a man known as Bar Kokhba, who was a leader of the military side of Judaism at a time of Roman occupation. This was about 70 years after the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans, which took place in 70. And Rabbi Akiva went so far as to say, not only should we join Bar Kokhba in a military uprising, but he is the Messiah. that Bar Kokhba is Mashiach. He is the one who will bring us to the end of days, the ultimate writing of history, in order that there should be redemption and peace for everyone across the globe. Well, he got that wrong, as we can tell, because, well, we're here and we're not living through the redemptive phase quite yet. But the Romans not only said that he was wrong, and not only put down that rebellion, but they did so in an especially brutal manner. Rabbi Akiva and many other rabbis were famously tortured publicly and martyred for the cheering crowds of various spectacles. This is something we commemorate in the Ela Ezkara portion of our Yom Kippur service. But the general population of the area was also put to the slaughter and were sold as slaves. The Jewish community was shattered beyond belief. And it is not beyond belief to imagine that the students of Rabbi Akiva would have supported his proclamation, would have supported Bar Kokhba, especially passionately, given their leader's idea that he was the Messiah. And so, of course, the Roman reprisals would have targeted them especially as well. And so the plague that they were enduring is most likely the plague of the Roman reprisals. We know at the very minimum that the Romans prevented us from burying our dead for many, many days. And to imagine that Lag BaOmer commemorates when at last that period of intense persecution, because it didn't stop altogether, but the intense persecution came to an end, that they were no longer being hunted, and that we were beginning to be able to, build again. That is what we commemorate on this day of Lag BaOmer. So what does this have to do with trimming beards, and why rush out, or rush to the mir to take care of it when Lag BaOmer is finally upon us? Well, because we have to carry the history with us. We have to remember during these days the catastrophe that befell our people during this time. After all, we are still living through the repercussions. It wasn't until 1948 that we finally had sovereignty over our land again in Israel, and as we know, that is still tenuous, give or take the antagonism of many other forces. But we also have to recognize that we cannot live in a constant state of mournfulness, that we cannot only live with the pain of the past. And Judaism tells us that there is, quite literally, a time for everything under the sun, that there is a time for mourning, and there is a time for rejoicing. And at different periods in our people's history, we have tended sometimes to lean too heavily into embracing the mournfulness, sometimes at the expense of our celebrations. And so, for myself personally, when Lag BaOmer rolls around, I don't merely take permission to give my trim, but I say we must recognize that there was an end to the catastrophe that befell, that there was a moment of hope, that there was a new chance to rebuild. And doing something as simple as trimming the old whiskers gives me a chance to relive that sense of hope, that sense of optimism, that sense of purpose for the future. Bar Kokhba may not have been Mashiach, but that doesn't mean Mashiach won't come. Rabbi Akiva may have been wrong about when peace would come to the earth, but that doesn't mean peace won't come. We absolutely must mourn what has befallen in the past, but that does not mean that our mournfulness is eternal. There is an end to all of our grief, and eventually we will do more than just trim. Eventually we will be able to truly celebrate this world being brought into the focus of perfection, brought into its true state of peace. And may it happen soon in our days.